You look concerned, Kim.
I know, Twitter's being weird. It's okay.
Twitter, isn't it? It's nature. All right, ready? This is
Live.
Friday. Yep. Ready? This is Friday, May 30th. There are 54 days until San Diego Comic-Con 2014. Welcome to the SDConCast, the official podcast of the San Diego Comic-Con unofficial blog. Insert music.
Beep, 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 beep. Oh.
Yeah, I always get nervous that I'm going to read that wrong or get the numbers wrong. I did the math. I think it works. Okay. Welcome to the SDConCast. Hello, everybody who's joining us live. I'm your host, Jeremy Rutz. Joining me on the podcast is James Riley, my co-host, the J from another coast. I think that's your new nickname.
I think so.
James.
Good evening.
Ooh, formal.
Yeah.
I missed you last week, James.
I missed you guys too. I did get to go to the Mall of America and see X-Men, but I still missed everyone.
Ooh, I want to hear about that. And also, Ali, which on the outline, James conveniently put his name above Ali. So.
Oh wait, what?
Yeah, look at that. I'm looking at that, and so that's a good way to introduce our guest, our first guest for our season 3 of the San Diego Comic-Con unofficial blog podcast, Ali Mattu. Hello, Ali.
Hi, everyone. It's awesome to be here. Long-time fan, first-time guest person.
First-time caller?
Yeah.
Ali is, what do I want to call you, the creator of BrainKnowsBetter.com and also the host of Super Fantastic Nerd Hour podcast?
That sounds pretty good to me.
Awesome. And then also Carrie Dixon.
Hey, everybody.
Carrie. We gotta do we have to do a Carrie bot because every time I go, hey Carrie, and you go, hey everybody, it's always the same. We just have like a cardboard, hey everybody. That's
See,
it.
you said I laughed at everyone. I'm not laughing at that.
You just muted your mic, that's all. And then outside Comic-Con herself, Kim Twombly. Hello, Kim.
Hello.
Yeah, we have a full panel. This is like...
My screen's almost full at the bottom.
We could divide it into halves and do like Family Feud. We have so many people. From Conshark News, Sarah Merton. Hello, Sarah.
Hey, folks.
Hey, folks. All right, and joining us for the first time this year, I'm so excited to have Sean, the Confluence Marshall, on our podcast.
Hey, guys. Thank you
He's
very much for having me.
overlayless. He's overlayless, but nonetheless never unprepared.
Right. I didn't want to give in to the peer pressure tonight, so I'm just going nude with that for tonight.
Wow. So what's everybody been doing? Ali, I want to start with you because you're our guest, and it's only polite to start with our guest. What have you been doing with yourself the last, 30-something years since you haven't been on the podcast?
Well, I mean, it's awesome movie season right now. So, X-Men, of course. That was a big part of the week, and it was awesome. And then for you guys, I was trying to get that article written about the psychology of Comic-Con, something I've been procrastinating on a long time. So, it was a pretty big X-Men full week.
Very cool. I want to hear what you thought about the X-Men.
Love it.
Yeah?
I'm a huge X-Men fan, going all the way back to X-Men the Animated Series. My first comic was Wolverine, I think issue number 67 or something like that. Always been a big-time fan of X-Men, and I thought this movie, like X2, is amazing. And I'm not going to get into spoilers, but I'm pretty happy with how it kind of resets things at the end. So,
good.
Big fan.
Yeah, I read your review, and if everybody, Ali's got a review on his website, BrainKnowsBetter.com, is an excellent. I don't want to call it a review as much as it is like an analysis, right? Is that a good term?
Yeah. When I'm not doing awesome stuff like this, which I wish I could be doing all the time, I'm a psychologist, so I like to explore science fiction from that perspective and kind of talk about the science fiction in there. And X-Men is one of the awesome stories about in-group, out-group conflict, what happens when different people don't get along, and sort of ideas about empathy and groups and working together. So I thought Days of Future Past did an awesome job of telling that story.
Yeah. Now, and James, I want to hear you chime in too. But where you rank it within the kind of X-Men film franchise, right? So, I mean, it's kind of interesting because X-Men pretty much started the whole Marvel Cinematic Universe, right? I mean,
Yeah.
it was the first big Marvel movie, so to speak, and I think that was back in 2000.
2000. Yeah, you had
Yeah.
Blade before that.
Yeah,
Uh,
which
and then
that was kind of like surprise, Marvel can make a movie out of their franchise. Like they were just kind of giving up at that point. And then X-Men came out, which I didn't think would ever happen, and it was a big hit. And then obviously X2, which was amazing. So where does this? We don't even talk about X3 or Wolverine, but the first Wolverine, the second one was good. But where does this kind of fall for you?
X-Men and Days of Future Past, I think, are both number one for me. If I have to pick one, it's hard to do the math there because you're right. X-Men and X2 were kind of the first great Marvel superhero films, and I think Days of Future Past is so influenced by everything that's been happening with Marvel Studios and with Avengers. I mean, if you look at what Joss Whedon did with Avengers and how all the superpowers work together, that's all kind of, you see the influence there in the first few scenes of Days of Future Past. So I think while X-Men launched things, Days of Future Past is very much is taking the level and pushing it forward. And compared to the Marvel movies, the X-Men ones would give us really interesting villains, and with this one, who's the villain? I think we can sympathize and empathize with all the characters here. So I think they're X2, Days of Future Past, both number one for me, but I want to hear from you guys, see what you guys thought.
Yeah, well, I know James, Carrie, who else saw X-Men? Sean, did you see it?
I did, yes.
All right, so real quick, I don't want to belabor this, but what did you guys think of Days of Future Past? Did it live up to your expectations? I mean,
Yes.
James and I were in, and now Ali, I don't know if you were in Hall H last year when they had the mammoth X-Men panel, but James and I were there, and I remember when we came out of that, we were like, oh my God, this is like the most amazing thing we've ever seen, panel-wise, but also the footage that they showed. It was just like, we cannot wait for this movie. Now, I confess I haven't seen it, but most of you guys have. So James, did it live up to the panel from last year?
Oddly enough, it did, and in a strange way. The stuff they showed us, because they had just started filming, was mainly character beats. And I read a few reviews, and it was true. What they were showing us, what Comic-Con, was actually what the movie was. It was all about character. There was so little... I read a review about how there was so little mass destruction, because there was just not these massive, Man of Steel style destruction pieces. It was about the characters, and so yeah, it totally lived up to what I saw. It wasn't what I was expecting, but it was still a really good movie, and I enjoyed it. And I'm not sure exactly where I'm going to rank it. I'm actually going to have to go watch it again, because I had been awake for about a day when I watched it, and I actually nodded off a couple of times. So I have to watch it again so I can catch a few bits in the middle that I missed. But I did, watch most of the first hour and then most of the end.
Yeah.
I saw all the end, but I missed some in the middle. So I need to watch it again to really get my full view of it. But yeah, I really enjoyed it.
Yeah. What about you, Carrie?
I really liked it too, and kind of going along with what James said about it being about character. One of the things that I loved is I am really kind of tired of origin stories, and the nice thing about this was it just automatically assumed you knew who everybody was, you knew what they could do, and it just didn't feel the need to re-explain all of that, and it just went right into the story.
Interesting.
Which is kind of rare.
Who else saw it? Sean?
I did. Yeah, I liked it. I really built it up because it was probably the movie I was most looking forward to this year. So it was hard to maybe live up to those expectations. There were some things with pacing that I wasn't as crazy about, but I definitely liked it. The kid, well, I don't want to get into spoilers. There's just a few things that kind of had a little bit of issues with, but I definitely liked it. And like coming into the year, that was like the movie for me. So I need to see it again as well to kind of see where it really fits in with a new mindset on it too, because I had such high hopes for it too. And still having Captain America fresh in my mind, which really blew me away in a lot of ways too. That kind of feeds into it too. So just kind of sorting out where all the movies fit in still for this early of the summer.
Yeah. it definitely suffered from a lack of Dane DeHaan.
Yes.
What about you,
You
Sarah?
totally
Did you
had to
see
work
it?
it in.
I had to work it in. Sarah, did you see it?
Yeah, I saw it. I liked it. I liked it a lot. I think I liked First Class a little bit better.
Yeah, First Class was good.
I mean, I have some nitpicky complaints about Days of Future Past, but they're all relatively small. I just like the vibe of First Class a little bit better. So I think it's probably number 2 for me, but it's like a really close second.
Yeah, and I like Ali. I think this is what you were talking about, where you really didn't know who the villain was. It's like the way that I've seen the X-Men movies, and especially with First Class, is that they both have motives you can respect, and I'm talking about Xavier and Magneto. You know, like you both understand where they're coming from. They're just on different sides of the coin. You know, it doesn't necessarily make one. I guess one acts more. What do you want to call it? He has better judgment. I don't know what you want to call it. Like
A better moral compass.
better moral compass. Thank you. But they both have their points, you know, and they both kind of want the same thing. So it's really interesting that it's such a dynamic, set of characters there.
Well, and you look at this in Captain America too, and these movies are about something. They're about big ideas, and yeah, they're awesome superhero movies, and they have some great action moments. But they're exploring really big ideas, and that's awesome. I love having something that walking out of the theater, it continues to kind of play on in my mind, and it's something to chew on and think about. And it's been a good year for the blockbusters so far, I think.
Didn't they have a mutant protest thing at Comic-Con last year, or a mock one? Didn't they do that? I'm sure they've done that in years past.
They have the Trump posters, the propaganda posters,
Right, I remember
and
they
the
had that
hats and
last
stuff outside.
Yeah. All right. Well, cool. So that's X-Men. I haven't seen it, but you guys have all seen it, so boo-hoo. All right. Let's move on. And Ali, we're gonna get to your article about the psychology of Comic-Con in a little bit, but just wanted to go through the rest. So James, you were in a convention last week.
Yeah, I was at Anna Minneapolis in Minneapolis, of all places.
I was at Anna Minneapolis in Orlando, Florida.
So it was the second convention in 2 weekends. The first one was the Steampunk World's Fair in New Jersey, and then Anna Minneapolis, an anime convention in Minneapolis. And let me tell you, that's 2 completely different styles of convention.
Really?
Yeah, it was weird. I mean, the first one was in 2 hotels, spread across, big tent in the middle, vendors in the parking lot, vendors in rooms on the first floor, lines in the hallways, just haphazard everything. And then Anime Minneapolis was like, in one hotel, everything like, panel rooms, big main event room, dealer's room, all in one place. It was just like the story of 2 cons, but we had a great time at both, so.
And you're probably thankful for not being on a plane right now.
Yeah, there was a lot of planes the last 2 weeks.
Yeah. When's your next convention?
Next convention is July 4th weekend, going to Anime Midwest in Chicago.
Ah, very cool. All right, Anime Midwest Chicago. Look for James. Okay. Anything else, James? You probably just catching up.
Went to the Mall of America while I was there.
Sweet.
First time ever going there. Yeah, that thing's huge. They have a theme park in the middle of the thing. That's just weird.
That's just weird. Well, you got to figure they have to have it indoors at Minneapolis, right?
Yeah.
It's not California.
And it's like it's like different. It's like it's 5 malls in one because they have like the same stores on each side of the mall. There's like 5 of the same coffee shop throughout the mall. It's just massive.
Yeah.
Does it have a pretty good comic book store?
Didn't find a comic book store.
Wow.
What?
Yeah. They might have had one, but I didn't see one. We only made it to like half of one floor because we had to go right up to the movie theater, and then we went and found some food on the other side, and then came back and went to the movie, and then left. So we didn't get to see a whole lot.
Wow, that's crazy. No comic book store in such a big mall.
That we know of.
That we know of. If anybody from Minneapolis, if there's a comic book store, there you go. Let us know. All right, so moving right along. Carrie, what have you been doing?
Not a whole lot beyond seeing X-Men, which we've already talked about quite a bit.
Yeah, that's it.
That's pretty much it. I'm like Sarah last week. I've just been sitting here.
You haven't moved.
That's right. I haven't moved at all.
You might want to get up once in a while just to kind of, yeah. No,
Overrated.
Yeah, to each their own. All right, Kim, what's up with you?
Oh, not much. I saw X-Men, and of all the movies I've seen recently, it was the best.
What was the best?
Days of Future Past. Sorry, I thought I was muted, but I'm not. And just going back really quick, I just loved how it tied into the first movie, which was my favorite back in the day, back when I was in college. I could watch that DVD over and over. So the tie into that was fantastic, which made me just love this movie even more.
Cool. All right, what else you been doing?
Since last week?
Yeah. Did you go on any events or anything cool in San Diego?
Nothing I can think of, probably, but...
You're saving your energy.
Yes.
You're powering up for Comic-Con. You're building your power meter. So to speak. All right, Sarah.
Yes.
What's up with you, man?
Yeah, I actually kind of spent my week catching up on movies that came out in the last few months that I never saw. So I finally saw Captain America. Finally.
Yeah.
And I like that. That was good. I didn't really like the first one so much, so I like the second one.
Did anybody all right, so first Captain America, right? Did anybody catch this, like, it had like that weird British soap opera effect? Like it looked like it was in like a weird frame rate, like it was all kind of blurry all the time, like the movement. Was it just me?
I don't remember.
Too many mushrooms seeing that movie, perhaps? I don't know. I thought it was this weird post effect that they did on that movie that I thought was like very strange. But okay, go on. Sorry, didn't mean to interrupt.
No, you're good. And then I saw a Lego movie today, which was like polar opposites, so that was interesting.
Ah, cool. Yeah, I saw that. That's cool. Very cool.
Yeah, it was fun.
Was anybody in Hall H for the Lego movie panel last year? Besides me and James? So did you guys saw the kid, right? The kid that dropped the mic at the Q&A? Do you guys remember that?
I heard about that.
Well, we have a video. I'll have to post it in the show notes. It was awesome. Basically, you have to watch it. I'll put it in the show notes. Okay. You had to be there. And I was. I guess I was the only one. But cool. All right. Anything else, Sarah?
No, other than that, just kind of lying low, because it's Long Beach Comic Expo this weekend. I think Sean's going too.
Yep.
Yeah, cool. What's that convention like?
I haven't been before, so Sean could answer that better than me.
Good segue, Sean.
Is that the segue?
Yeah, I think so.
Well, Long Beach is this weekend. Yeah, it's Comic Expo. So this year they've spread out to 2 days. It's been historically 1 day, and then they have a larger 2 to 3 day show in the fall. So this year, though, they're doing a 2 day in the spring. So more panels. And one of the things that's been really cool about that in the past is just as a 1 day show having panels, because that's not the most common thing. Obviously, 2 and 3 days you expect that, but for a 1 day show, they've always had a good number of panels for that type of a crowd, but this year it's 2 days, and so yeah, anxious to see what it is. Long Beach is just about one of the best places to have a convention. It's kind of for us right there with the gas lamp for San Diego in terms of just the overall setting, you know, on the water and the coolness of the breeze and the restaurants and all that type of stuff. So definitely looking forward to it.
Oh, very nice. And yeah, I was going to ask you because they do the 2 conventions, but you touched on that. What kind of creators or companies attend? It's obviously more in the fall, but who do you get, like an Image, or who do you get at? Yeah,
it's definitely smaller, like Aspen and Boom will be there, and Top Cow in terms of the comic stuff, and then it's ranged over the years. Like Robot Chicken's been there having a panel before. What's his name? Iron Man 2 director, is it Shane Black? Yeah.
Yeah,
right?
Iron Man 3.
Yeah, Iron Man 3. I'm sorry. They had a panel for him one time, so it's kind of been some random type ones. That's for the fall one, but they really focus a lot on the comic books and especially kind of the independent creators and local creators. So it's not the type of show where a ton of people are flying in, but it's got a really strong kind of artist base, and it's definitely kind of an artist show, and so it's definitely a fun and relaxing show.
Very cool. All right. What? So what else is it? Is that? What else have you been doing? Anything else mentioning?
I guess since the last podcast, just a lot of conventions and a lot of theme park stuff. So we do a lot more with the theme park things now. So we did the Disney 24-hour day, not all of it, but just a slice of the hours last week, and doing a lot of stuff with Knott's Berry Farm, and just hitting. I think Long Beach will be our 19th convention this weekend. So just hitting the road a lot. Anything that's kind of within 7 hours, we try to make the drive if at all possible, and so it's a lot of that.
Very cool. All right, and I'll just chime in with stuff I've been doing. So I haven't been doing much. I don't get out a lot, but I did see Godzilla last week finally, and that was pretty good. I was not disappointed. Mm-hmm. It didn't live up to the high expectations, but it was decent. But that's an old movie, so we won't talk about that. The other thing is I just finished a book because I am a big video game fan, so I just finished this book called Console Wars that just came out by Blake J. Harris, and it's basically about the 16-bit era, the Sega versus Nintendo battle, and kind of how that came about and the history around it. So that was a pretty cool book. I recommend that for anybody who's a video game fan and grew up in that era. But that's about it. Working on the on the blog and all that good stuff. So, all right. Anything else before we get into the meat of the podcast, guys? Nope. All right. So let's go ahead and get started. So, Ali. So, you mentioned that you wrote an article, and it just came out yesterday, about the psychology of Comic-Cons. Basically, not San Diego Comic-Con, but Comic-Cons in general.
Yeah.
So give us a little bit of background about the intent of that article, or how it kind of came to be.
So I mean, there's two kind of origin stories here. One is a lot of times when I'm kind of doing the normal stuff that I do, and people find out that maybe I go to Comic-Con or I'm going to a Comic-Con and they aren't necessarily nerd folk. There's this response like, wait, really? You're going to, the place where those people like dress up and stuff? Like, isn't it kind of weird, and aren't they weird people? And then you kind of go through the same story over and over and again, and you tell people, well, no, this is why people cosplay, and part of it's to kind of celebrate a character. It's like Halloween, and sometimes it's about art and the craftsmanship and all of that. And so that was always happening. And then last year I was at San Diego Comic-Con at the exhibit hall, and I was talking to someone at a booth, and it was a small little company, and they make those portable chargers, those things that you can like have on your keychain. And I was trying to tell the guy that he needs to invent one that looks like a warp core from Star Trek. So you basically you're plugging in your cell phone to the dilithium crystals and stuff. I thought that'd be pretty cool because they had a Star Wars brand, but they didn't have a Star Trek one. Anyways, he kind of leans over and he finds out I'm a psychologist, and he's like, so what do you think about all this? And is this healthy? I don't know. I kind of go back and forth in my mind. And so the intent of this article was to on the one hand, help people who haven't necessarily gone to Comic-Con. Maybe they've heard of it. Maybe they've heard of cosplay. Maybe they see some of the news but don't necessarily know what it's all about, to help them understand what the experience is. And then on the other hand, to help con-goers get a better appreciation of the good, the bad, and the ugly of Comic-Con and why those different things happen.
Mm-hmm. So what is Comic-Con to you?
Well, I mean, I've been going to conventions since I think like 1994 or something. I'm a big Trekkie, so I went to a lot of Star Trek conventions in the 90s and in the 2000s. And when I went to my first one, this is right before Star Trek Generations came out, back when we thought it was going to be a good movie. Like, oh wow, it's going to be awesome. Patrick Stewart, William Shatner. Little did we know it was going to be a pretty bad one. But I had just become a Star Trek fan. I didn't really know anyone else outside my family who was a Star Trek fan. So going to that con kind of opened up my eyes to this larger world and this larger community of geekdom. And it made me feel less of alone as a fan. And times have changed since then. And the Comic-Con culture exploded in the 2000s when Hollywood came into San Diego and all that. But to me, conventions, Comic-Cons, gaming expos, they're a way to connect to a larger community that loves the same things you do. I think that is the defining characteristic of it, and we are inherently social beings. It is the one thing that we can do that no other animal can do as well as us, and so the opportunity to meet other people, to connect, to share ideas, to geek out, all of that kind of stuff. I think that's what Comic-Con means to me at the end of the day.
Yeah, no, it's really interesting because, and I'll have this debate kind of internally among the team and some other folks, but Comic-Con has kind of been like this celebration of everything that's it's supposed to be, geeky in quotes, right? But if you look at what's there, I mean, it runs the range of the very obscure to the completely mainstream blockbuster, millions of people. I mean, like, you look at the biggest movies of all time, and they've been at Comic-Con, and so you have the general populace. Comic-Con appeals to them, but also appeals to the I don't know if we want to call it the niche communities or the smaller communities or the more specialized communities of fandom. What is it to you that that Comic-Con appeals to all types of people?
Man, that's a really good question, and I think everything sort of changed once Hollywood came in, and I think that's what you're getting at is a lot of these other big franchises and these big properties now sort of are always at Comic-Con, and that's brought in the larger interest as well, in sort of the less nerdy or less niche nerd. Let's use that.
We call it like the Twilight effect, right?
Oh,
yeah. Blames Twilight or Avatar for coming to Comic-Con and just bringing the attention to Comic-Con, and now it's something that 5 years ago it wasn't, for example, or 10 years ago now.
I think, Jeremy, you are bringing up probably one of the most intensely debated issues, I think, in the geek community. And I think we're going to have a strong reaction to this, but I think what we're seeing is a mainstreaming of geek culture. And sports analogies and are always something I use to kind of help people understand Comic-Con, and saying that it's basically the Super Bowl of nerddom. It's when all the world's attention is on this one event, this one city, this one place for 4 days, and the news is dominated by that. And I think similar to the sports analogy, we're seeing a mainstreaming of this. I see people walking around with Captain America T-shirts, kids dressed up as Wolverine all the time now. It's so much more common and popular now than it was when I was growing up. So I think a lot of the geek culture has been kind of more mainstreamed in many ways, like we have with sports culture. It's totally acceptable to be walking down the street with a jersey, and we're not quite there yet with like cosplay, but we're getting much closer. So I think we're seeing a lot of the mainstreaming, and for better or worse, this brings up stuff like Big Bang Theory, and I know a lot of people have strong feelings about that, but I think the popularity of a show like that kind of brings up some of the mainstreaming that's been happening.
Yeah, and it's funny because you mentioned sports, and I always say to people, you mentioned Comic-Con's our Super Bowl, but what we do around here is kind of like our fantasy football. because
Yeah.
we're constantly like playing around with, okay, well, here's this news and here's this bit, and this is how it puts together, and this is how things might shape up, and we're doing that months ahead of time, trying to prepare for what's going to go on in July. So it's kind of an apt analogy. But okay, so your article, it's called "The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly Psychology of Comic-Con." So we've kind of touched a little bit upon the good, but let's talk a little bit about the bad, so to speak. So what do you, when you say bad at Comic-Con, can you elaborate or clarify on that?
Yeah. So that part was really getting at the things that are really hard about Comic-Con, the things that are draining, the things that are exhausting, and there's some that are very obvious. Like, yes, you get very tired. Like, no one realizes how much you end up walking at the convention hall. You're going to this one panel over here, and then you got to walk all the way across to go to the other one. Then you got some time to kill, so you go to the exhibit hall, but it's massive. But you don't get the whole scale because there's so many booths set up, so you end up walking like 3 football fields. You don't even realize it, and this whole time you haven't drank any water or had any food, and you're so excited, and all this time has gone by, and then like afterwards you realize, holy crap, I have not like had to drink water, I haven't had food, I've walked like miles and miles and miles. So all of that stuff is exhausting. You also have that convention air, so it's not really that well ventilated. Like,
is it the air, or is it, as James and I commonly refer to it as, the essence of Comic-Con? Right, James?
Totally, yeah. Essence.
The essence. But I'm sorry. Go ahead, Ali.
Oh no, it's they should.
You can take that for however
They should bottle that up, the essence of Comic-Con, and sell it. I'm sure it'll make millions as an exclusive. So
right, exactly.
It's physically exhausting. It's also mentally exhausting. I think there's been a lot more discussion about how being in those massive crowds, how it is anxiety provoking for a lot of people, because it's always normal to be anxious in a new or dangerous situation. So I think that experience for first-time con goers is a very anxiety-provoking one, because how often are you in a area where there's 130 other 1,000 people there? It's not a situation you run into too often. So it can bring up anxiety, and when we're exhausted, when we're dehydrated and you're anxious, it can be a very overwhelming thing. So that's part of the bad, but the other part of the bad too was the experiences that might kind of leave a bad taste in your mouth. So lines, for example, there's a line for everything, and the way the lines are really designed are kind of some of the really poorly psychologically designed stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Jeremy, we were at WonderCon, and a lot of you actually were at WonderCon a few weeks ago, and some of us went to Disney. And you go to Disney, and you end up waiting in line for like 45 minutes, an hour, stuff like that, and it's pleasant. Like they do a lot. They do a lot of stuff to hide the line, so you don't realize how long it is.
Right.
They exaggerate on the wait times. When you see the Fast Pass, there's Fast Pass on one side and estimated wait. The estimated wait is always longer. They do that intentionally so that when you get to the end and you're like, oh, that wasn't 45 minutes, that was so much faster. It turns out that the psychology of lines is how the experience ends is far more important than the rest of the whole experience waiting in line. So if you feel good at the end of it, you kind of forget that you waited for like an hour or something. You go to Comic-Con, you see these massive lines. They're slow-moving lines. There's not much to do during the line, and a lot of times you don't get in. So a lot of people end with this very kind of bad experience. And I've got this dream that I'm gonna say it here. Maybe someday someone at San Diego Comic-Con can make this happen. But like, how cool would it be if they had like an Hall H experience? So it's basically like the line for Hall H, but you're like waiting in this queue where it's like covered, and you go inside and there's like screens that have past Hall H panels. It's like this Hall of Fame of like previous awesome panels, right? And then like while you're in line, they might be you can buy a Coke, like Coca-Cola, like not other Coke, but you can buy stuff. You can see this stuff. Much more.
Oh wait, hold on, Ali. I think I'm losing you here.
Experience. No in line. So I'm back. Okay. I had to send my consciousness back in time a little bit. Sorry, it
Okay,
kind of
good.
does that sometimes. So the other thing is with the exhibit hall, when you are drained, when you are exhausted, and when you think there's a scarcity of something, when you there's a supply of something and it's something you care about, you're far more likely to make impulse buys. And we see that all the time with the exclusives. So that was a little bit of the bad side.
Yeah, and okay, so what about so there's the good, the bad, and the ugly. So what is the ugly of Comic-Con?
Yeah, the ugly, so the ugly really gets at some of the ugly things that can happen there. So there's been a lot of discussion from previous Comic-Cons about some of the sexual harassment that happens. This definitely happens to cosplayers, and it happens predominantly to female cosplayers, sometimes male cosplayers too.
And you know that was just actually in the news today because Comic-Con actually responded to the petition that's been going around the last couple of days.
Oh, what was the response?
Well, it was on Comic Book Resources, and you know, it was a you can read it or I can pull it up, but I mean it was a vague response. You know, they kind of danced around the situation, but they said they did have a policy. It wasn't specific to
Yeah, they basically
cosplayers.
quoted what's already in their.
You there, James?
Yeah, they basically just quoted what's already in on their website and their policy.
Yep. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think there's been a lot of discussion about that, about wanting Comic-Con International to take a larger stance on this. So I think it's coming off the heels of WonderCon and that T-shirt that that was identified by one of the.
Oh yeah, that was awful.
That was a horrible T-shirt. What did it say? It said, I like fangirls as much as I like coffee. I hate coffee." And there's been a lot of this fake fangirl, fake geek girl stuff. That's really it's more kind of the sexism that is lurking out there. And so, you know, when you think about the harassment, and there's a big case of this at New York Comic Con last year, and you know, these things have been in the news much more. This isn't unique to the geek community. This isn't unique to Comic Cons. But one of the things that is unique to Comic Cons is when you have massive amounts of people. One of the things that can happen is something called de-individuation. You see this in very large parades like Mardi Gras. You see this in very large concert. Anytime you have a massive amount of people, you can lose your sense of individuality, and you can kind of get swept up in the crowd. And then whatever the crowd is doing, you can kind of end up doing this yourself. I remember this happened to me when I was in high school. We had like a school rally, and then things got crazy, and then people started throwing their food all over each other, and it was this massive like food fight. And I ended up, I remember getting swayed into it just because everyone else was doing it. You had this feeling that since everyone is doing it, there's so many massive people, no one person will get caught. You can get away with things. It's kind of a social lubricant. It's a lot worse when people are drunk or on drugs, and that doesn't happen too much at Comic-Con, but what does happen is if people are sleep deprived, if they're exhausted, you're also more likely to get into de-individuation. So that's one of the reasons why I think we see some of the ugly side of Comic-Con more at a place like Comic-Con than you would just kind of walking down the street, because you don't have those massive crowds.
Yeah. Yeah, you know, one thing I wanted to ask you, you mentioned the kind of fake geek boys and geek girls, I guess is how you put it. But I don't know if this is directly what you were talking about, but there seems to be this backlash against people who are now. I don't want to say coming out, but coming out in the geek community, right? So they're like the cool dudes in school or whatever, where they wear the nice clothes, and all of a sudden, oh yeah, I'm a geek too. And then there seems to be this like backlash of like almost exclusionary, like the people they say, well, I'm a true geek, you're not a real geek, and get out of our club, and it ends up being like this private country club. Like what is going on there? What do you see that, or do you see that going on at all?
Yeah, I think that gets back to some of the ideas from Days of Future Past. I think this is kind of the storyline of X-Men, and it gets to these really basic principles in social psychology. We kind of evolved to be in these small social groups, and there's this very basic part of our software called the self-serving bias, which is to feel good about yourself and to take credit for things that go well for you, and to kind of blame your failures on other people, and to like your group better than the out group.
Mm-hmm.
And the research on this kind of stuff is really interesting. Like if we take like 20, 30 people and randomly assign them to group 1, 2, or 3 for no random assignment, people like their group better than the other group, and they think their group is cooler and the other group sucks. Like, we all kind of do this. So it's this in-group, out-group psychology, and it happened. I think this is part of what's happening here, is this kind of belief that, well, you don't necessarily look like my group. You've had a different experience. You don't know what it's like to be a geek. You're different. Your geek cred isn't up to my par, and I think we see that with some of this stuff that you're talking about, like the cool geeks, the country club geeks, as you're talking about.
Right.
I think you also see this in like
lack of a better term. Right?
Yeah. Well, and I mean, kind of getting back to what you said about Twilight. Like, I think there's a lot of well, you guys, you Twilight fans, you don't belong here at San Diego Comic Con. Like, this is not your place. Mm-hmm. Or sci-fi fans or whatever it might be. Like, I think my geek cred is always challenged when I'm at San Diego Comic Con and people start asking me about comics. And I read a lot of comics when I was younger, and now I read graphic novels, but I don't read issue to issue.
Right.
So I always feel like, when that's challenged, I get really nervous and anxious, and sometimes people are like, well, you're not really a comic book geek. So it's a lot of in-group, out-group stuff, and the way you fight it is basically once you do get to know someone else, once you do start talking to them, you do have empathy, that is what kind of breaks some of that stuff down, which is why I think Professor X is who he is, because he reads minds. He has like ultimate empathy.
Yeah.
But that's a little tangent. So I think it's a lot of it is these stereotypes about these different fan communities, about geeks. It gets really easy to slip into that in-group, out-group stuff.
Yeah, interesting. Okay. We've got a couple of questions from the team here. I'll let you guys ask the questions. I don't know who put them in the notes. I don't want to do all the talking. And also the folks that are watching online, feel free to tweet us any questions that you have for Ali. Who asked the first one? Was that Sean?
I think the ones that I had, you actually kind of encompassed most of them, because I talked about the sports analogies and some of that, so I think you've actually hit on most of them. The only one that maybe wasn't was just the idea of what's often talked about with the rise of Comic Cons and the potential bubbles and the burst and things like that, of just your opinion on the idea of whether this is a direction where we'll see a continuing spreading of that Comic Con culture of more small shows becoming medium and medium large and so on and so forth, or do you think we'll reach that kind of stabilization point in the next few years and kind of hit it, or we'll just go bust?
I think it's going to be really interesting to see what happens. It's a real interesting time. I think since 2010, there has been this bubble that's been getting bigger and bigger and bigger. Pretty much every big city has some type of Comic-Con now. And, I don't think it's sustainable to have... I don't think it's sustainable to have multiple giant Comic-Cons like what we see in San Diego, in New York, and Chicago. And I think a lot of the professionals in the industry do feel themselves strained, where they're sending their team over here to Chicago, but someone else is going to New Orleans, and all right, we're going to go to Houston, and all of that. And now, now you guys are covering WonderCon and San Diego too, and I think it kind of spreading people pretty thin. I also don't think it's financially sustainable to have these large Comic-Cons, and I know, Jeremy, you guys you had a great article about this, about the Comic-Con culture and is it a bubble that's going to burst? Yeah. I think what we're going to see is Sean, like you were saying, we're going to see some stabilization where there's going to be a few big ones on the circuit. San Diego probably, New York probably, I think Chicago maybe, I don't know, maybe another one, maybe not. But I think after that we're going to see a lot of medium to small level Comic-Cons, And I'm cool with that. You know, I think it's going to be great for people to be able to go to a giant gathering, meet a lot of fans from the nearby area, and we don't really necessarily need all the celebrity stuff or all of the exhibit hall stuff to make that an awesome experience. What you need is cool people getting together to talk about the things that they loved in some type of organized way.
Yeah.
So I think we're going to see more of that kind of stuff. I really hope that we see a little bit of change here, because right now there's way too many wannabe saying there.
Yeah.
I don't know. I
Well,
mean,
I wanted
what do you guys think?
to ask you. Oh, well, so there's a couple questions that I have about that. So, like, you talked about how, there's a lot of conventions and it's stretching people thin. But do you believe, or do you think that it's because Comic-Con is a nonprofit, right?
Mhm.
Comic-Con International.
Mhm.
Some of these companies that are now entering in the space are for profit. They're commercial companies. And do you think that they're kind of feeding or seizing on people's, I don't want to call them vulnerabilities, but it's almost like they're taking advantage of this crowd and saying, well, we're going to prop up these cons and make money off of these people, and therefore they're the ones that are diluting the market. Do you have any thought about that?
Yeah, I do. Yeah, there was a lot of controversy this year, right, about San Diego Comic-Con tickets. How if you wanted preview night, you have to buy all the different days and all of that, and there's a lot of uproar about that.
Yeah.
Yeah, if we compare that though to some of the for-profit Comic-Cons that have the VIP experience, which is like $500, and that gets you, into a certain amount of panels, or it allows you to do this. It's a bit of a slippery slope there, and I do think in some ways people are being taken advantage of because of how awesome these experiences are, and it is so cool to be able to go to a con, to meet these people, to meet celebrities that you care about, to see all the cosplay and do all that kind of stuff. But I think there are a lot of for-profit companies that are creating these much more expensive products, and so I mean, I get a little bit worried about that, just with how that's affecting fans. I also sometimes I kind of worry about what's that going to do for San Diego.
Yeah.
I don't think San Diego's ever going to change the way it is. I think because it's so close to LA, because it's got the history, because it's the largest, it's always going to be the biggest. I really would like to see other Comic-Cons stop trying to replicate the formula of San Diego, actually, and bring some of the costs down. Not necessarily try to have the same level of celebrities, not try to have all the big industry news breaking at these events, and because you can't copy San Diego, you can't copy that exact formula. I'd love to see much more scaled down events that are cheaper, that are much more focused on the fan community. Last year at New York Comic Con, I've been going there every year since 2010, and it's gotten bigger and bigger and bigger, and much more industry focused. There's a lot more TV news that's breaking at New York Comic Con, and as a result, there's been a lot less sort of fan panels, or a lot of the panels that I think fans would be interested outside of the Hollywood stuff. So a lot of people are upset about that, and costs have gone up there. So I think New York is an example of a con that used to be smaller, used to be much more focused on the communities, now trying to replicate San Diego's pattern. So I hope we see a change here, because I do think it's expensive. It's getting more expensive, and I don't know. I'm not a big fan of that.
Yeah. Well, all right. So I wanted to. We have a question from our audience. Travis McIntyre says, "What keeps drawing everyone back to Comic-Con every year, despite the more hassles every year?"
I was thinking about this, kind of getting ready for the show. So I think it's a few things. Number one, the most the most rewarding and reinforcing type of experience that we can have is social, and I think that's a big part of it. Is whether it's making new friends just by talking to people online, whether it is meeting a celebrity and being able to share some of what the shows matter to you, which gets that gratitude in science. Is Comic-Con is incredibly different every year. While it's exactly the same experience, you've got Hall H, you've got Ballroom 20, you've got the cosplay, you've got the exhibit hall, you know DC's going to be there, you know Marvel's there, Nintendo's there. You have like certain things are exactly the same. What you see and what you experience is completely different every year, and especially with what goes around outside the city, and I think that's one of the things that separates San Diego from pretty much every other con except for maybe Dragon Con, is they spill out to the city and the city embraces it. Every year it's a different experience, and there's this really nasty thing in psychology called the habituation. Well, it's good and it's nasty. The good part of it is we get used to annoying things, like when you jump in the swimming pool and the water feels cold. If you stay there long enough, it feels like it's warmed up. The water has changed, but part of it, they're excited to buy your new smartphone, and then like 2 weeks later, it's like whatever. You don't care about it at all. Like when we get things and they stay the same, we get used to them. We don't care about them anymore. Experiences like San Diego Comic-Con are always changing. It's always going to be a different experience, and I think that's one of the things that keeps people coming back is the social aspect to it. But then it's always a new adventure, and we never know what it's going to be. And you could go to 10 Comic-Cons in a row and have completely different experiences and have awesome experiences.
Yeah, yeah. We got another question from Scott Mueller, who, well, it's not really a question, but statement. He says he calls the people around him in line his line family. He says it's great to get into conversations while waiting in line. And, you know, I have to say that I've been going to Comic-Con alone. So, you know, I'm married, I have kids, but my wife, even though she likes all the things at Comic-Con, she refuses to go. I don't know why, but she just refuses to go. So I've been attending by myself, and that's how I met, you know, everybody here on the podcast, is because, you know, I've started working on the blog and I've met them in San Diego, and now it ends up being like kind of like a family reunion as I go every year. But these are all people that I met at Comic-Con, you know, and you know, I've met people in line, and you know, you spend so much time with folks in line that you just start sharing, you know, your commonalities and your interests, and you know, that's just kind of that bonding moment. Have you had any experiences like that, Ali?
Yeah, totally. My experience have actually been very similar to yours, Jeremy. I've gone to a lot of cons. Most of the time I've gone alone. And especially at New York Comic Con, I didn't go with a friend until this past year's Comic Con. And last year at San Diego Comic Con, that was the first time I went to a con on the West Coast with a friend. And part of that is some of my close friends don't live in the near same place, and we couldn't get together and we couldn't make it happen. And then another part of it is some of my friends are just not into some of the stuff as I am. And I think that is the top hack, unknown or secret hack of Comic-Cons, is talking to your line family. That is one of my favorite things to do. I was at the 75 Years Superman panel at San Diego last year, and just kind of randomly started talking to someone after they asked me what time it is, and we ended up becoming really good friends. And like we really wanted to see Henry Cavill, so we got there like 4 sessions before. So we were like there for like the whole afternoon, and we just kind of chatted and hung out. And now we hang out on Twitter, and we'll probably see each other at San Diego this year. I was just on another podcast earlier in the week, Out Now with Aaron and Abe, where they talk about films, and we talked about X-Men. We met in line at WonderCon last year, and I think it's such a cool part of Comic-Con where when you're in line, the person you're waiting in line with loves the thing that you are also loving and waiting for. It's the only similar experience I think we can draw is going to a sports bar for a team that you love on game day. I think that's like the most similar thing. Again, this gets back to the sports analogies, or maybe waiting for a movie. Like on a midnight release, going to see Avengers or going to see Star Trek Into Darkness or whatever it might be at midnight on opening day, you know those are your people, and you know you can talk to those people. But a lot of times they bring their own friends, and it's a little bit different experience. I think at Comic-Con, people are so open to talking about this stuff, and that's part of the reason why people go. That's my favorite part of Comic-Con. If I have to name one, it's making random friends super easily.
Yeah, and you know, I have a similar situation. You know, because you spend so much time in Hall H or Ballroom 20, or like you said, you were in the panel room for like 4 panels before the one that you were. And I was striking up this conversation about how I love the Spider-Man Sam Raimi films, and I ended up it was Dane DeHaan right next to me. So it could happen. That was a joke. Sorry.
That would have been ironic.
He was like, dude. No, I'm kidding. All right. Let's see.
Oh, so, we have one more, Jeremy.
All right, I have one. All right, I have one more. So you had Ali and I are both on the East Coast. I'm in Philly. Ali's in New York. You guys are all on the West Coast, and obviously we're talking about West Coast cons primarily, which is San Diego Comic-Con and then WonderCon, and then there's New York Comic-Con, and there's also other conventions, not just Comic-Con. I mean, in your article, Ali, you talk about like PAX and things like that. So, video game conventions that are on the rise, Star Wars celebrations. It's everything, right? But I feel like there's a really different crowd between East Coast and West Coast, and I'm not trying to start a rivalry, but I mean, how viewing that, from your background and with your expertise, what makes those two crowds so different?
You know what? I think it's a few things. So I think each con has its own culture. Mm-hmm. There's definitely a different culture at New York Comic Con versus San Diego Comic Con. Totally different culture, even at WonderCon versus San Diego. And then you go to a place like PAX. Like, one of the cool things about PAX is there's these game rooms where they have these retro systems set up, and you can bring collection of NES games, SNES, Genesis, and kind of check them in, and they become part of this like communal library where people can share them. Like, that is a crazy, awesome, altruistic part of that culture of that con. So, and then you got like Dragon Con, where there's that big parade kind of culture, and there's a culture of people like opening up and sharing their hotel rooms and putting panels in their rooms. It's just like these are very different places. So each con has its own culture. I think there's that. And then there's like the East Coast, West Coast culture stuff. No offense to my West Coasters, I used to be one of you. I was born and raised in California. Things run a little bit slower on the West Coast than they do on the East Coast. Yeah. We're a little bit more neurotic, I guess would be the right word on the East Coast. So there's that kind of cultural stuff, but I think that's really what we're talking about here is the culture of the cons, and the culture of the cons comes from the people that go there as well.
I think we lost him.
No, I'm here.
Oh, okay. We lost the end there. Cut out a little bit at the end, but all right. Let's one more comment from our readers. I'm just looking through here. Where is it? NASCAR and Bronco fans. Oop. That's not our comment, by the way, that part. But NASCAR and Bronco fan says it's better debating about superheroes and football teams because there's no knockdown dragouts.
Yeah.
There could be, right? There could be. It all depends.
Well, and the other thing is you don't really. There's been some research that links, like we're talking Super Bowl here, and if your team loses, there's a huge drop in how people feel in the hometown of that team for days, and the opposite also happens when your team wins. But there's no real winners or losers.
Yeah.
I mean, better and worse, I guess, but there's no real losing. So that's one of the other things there too.
Yeah, so, and it's funny because, you reference Star Trek a lot, and even you had a panel at WonderCon called the Psychology, or was it Psychology of Star Trek versus Star Wars? Yep.
Yeah, yeah.
So, and you, obviously, you have a lot of history with Star Trek, so I think that's kind of, even though you probably like both, Star Trek is kind of like it's what's closest to you, right? Is that right?
Yes, I mean, that's why I got my Comic-Con T-shirt on and all of that. Yeah, I'm now Trekkie through and through.
But it's funny because that's something that's very polarizing. Like that, if you want to talk about your team, it could be Star Trek versus Star Wars.
Yeah. Oh. You're bringing up things that I'm cutting in and out. We good?
No, you're good now.
I'm good. Okay. Well, I used to go to a lot of Star Trek conventions, and Star Trek conventions sort of made the formula for how these things work, where you bring the celebrities up, you sell tickets, and you have a dealer's room. And Star Trek invented this formula back in the late 60s and early 70s, and the Star Trek fan community sort of brought that franchise back, right? It's one of those great historical geek communities. But I think the Star Trek conventions, compared to Comic-Cons, they're not as compelling to me as much anymore. And I think San Diego Comic-Con has really done a nice job of carving out stuff that is the celebrity stuff, carving out stuff that's more the fan community stuff. I think cosplay culture took off at Comic-Con. It didn't really take off at Star Trek conventions. So nowadays, if I have to pick one or the other, I'd much rather go to a Comic-Con, because it also taps into those other interests that I have outside of Star Trek, whereas Star Trek's just kind of more focused and doesn't have as much fan community stuff.
Right. When you talk about cosplay and that, it seems like there's cosplay has really become more widely accepted among Comic-Con attendees. Even 5 years ago, it seemed like the day that people dressed up back then was Saturday, because it was the day of the masquerade and everybody would show up, and that's when they'd be wearing the costumes. And now it's it's almost mainstream that if it's like the minority isn't wearing a costume, everybody else is, and they do it all 4 days. What do you think it is with the, is it because some people always had kind of that interest, but they were always afraid that they'd be seen differently, and then they start seeing more and more people do it, and then they do it, and then it just kind of catches on? I mean, what's your take on that? Yeah.
I think it's exactly. I think it's a few things. One is what you were saying is the culture has changed, and it's become more accepted to cosplay. I think some of the franchises have also taken off and become more mainstream, so it's not as even. Sometimes you might feel comfortable doing some of the low-level, more main. There's an acceptance that there's a wide range of cosplay. Sometimes I'll just I have a cape, and I'll just put the cape on and a Batman shirt, and that's it, and I'm kind of good to go. And you can do anything from that to a full-on make your own custom Batman suit. So I think I think it's become more accepted. People who cosplay are just kind of seen as a regular part of the con now, and I think that's it. I mean, Heroes of Cosplay is on Sci-Fi Channel. It's back for a second season. I think we're going to end up seeing even more of it now because of shows like that.
Okay. So real quick, does anybody else have any other questions for him? We don't have any other questions from our readers, I don't think.
And then after, I got a question for you guys. I've been dying to ask.
Uh-oh.
I think we covered a pretty good range of stuff.
We did.
I think you covered anything I would even have thought of.
Good. Good. Anything else from you, Sean, or Sarah, or Kim? Carrie? Nope.
No, I think we're good.
Okay, good. All right, Ali, this is your chance.
All right, so this is something I've wondered a lot.
Yeah.
And what do you guys think about panel rooms not being cleared after panels? So, I mean, everything from Hall H to Ballroom 20 to the small panels, because one of the things about the psychology of lines is it all comes down to whether or not people feel like it's fair, if a process is fair, and if they think it's fair, people tend to be fine with it, even if they don't get into a room. But when people think something's not fair, like if someone cut or they promised that they were going to get in and then they aren't able to do so, people get really angry, and that stuff can spread pretty quickly.
Yeah.
And I'm really wondering from you guys, and I think that gets to other stuff we can talk about too, but what do you guys think is the most fair way to clear the rooms or not clear the rooms and do all of that?
Wow, we have talked about that offline quite a bit, actually. James, let's start with you. I mean, because you have the most experience out of us, or between you and Sean, or maybe even Kim, going to conventions. But I mean, what's your take on that?
Honestly,
it's tough, isn't
because it's really tough question, because I don't know if fairness actually is a part of the equation.
Yeah.
Because both of them have pros and cons and are fair in different ways.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the person willing to wait overnight, in the case of Comic-Con, to get into Hall H where they don't clear the room, that's fair because they put in the time. On the reverse side, you know, someone may be sitting in that room all day who is only a fan of the panel that's going to be at 5 o'clock at night, and it's not fair to those other people who could have been in there to see the other panels that they wanted to see. So I don't think it's a question that you can actually answer.
Yeah. I mean, logistically, it's you know, if you talk about something like Hall H, I mean, I think that you're cheating out like attendees in general if you do something like that, because the logistics of clearing out 6,000 people and then ushering in another 6,000 would end up, you'd be cutting the panels that you'd have in half, you know?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Kim, were you gonna say something?
Yeah, that's just not doable for Hall H and even Ballroom 20. That would take so much time. I went to Dragon Con one year where they had panel clearing procedures, which they've now have stopped, and I got caught because I didn't know, having, you know, I think it was my either first or second year. It was like they hadn't done it the year before, and then it was one year they were starting it, and I got caught. I think it was the Weasley twins I really wanted to see, and then the panel before might have been Farscape or something that I also wanted to see, and I was like, oh, I have to leave? And then you get outside and the line's too long to get in. But the great thing about Dragon Con is that the guests will appear on multiple panels over the 4 days, so that, you know, there's always another, you know, you'll have another chance to see them.
Yeah.
But in that case, I can you know, you just have to make some tough choices, I guess, but it could only be done on a small scale convention, really.
Yeah.
See, for me, it's kind of like the opposite with something like, let's say, D23, where they clear the rooms in between. They just pad the time in, and so, but they're obviously not booking the same number as what a Hall H or Ballroom 20 is. But the thing to me, like for conventions, as many conventions as we go to, it's still always about like opportunity cost. And so, you know, like people say, oh, you don't really like panels. I love panels, but to me, there's no panel that's worth like 18 hours of my Comic-Con experience, or any experience really. There's just nothing that I feel that strongly to negate all the other things that I could be doing during that 18 hours, because there's going to be, you know, trailer park in between, or these random, you know, 1 hour. So if I can be in it, I definitely want to be in it. But you know, so or like D23 also used this year like the Fast Pass system, which was really unique. But it's like, so you get in a line to get a pass to get your seat reserved. So you do battle that out, but now you have a reservation for your seat, which means at least you just battle it out in the morning once, and now you can kind of plan your day. But and I know a lot of people will say, you know, too, they like they'll find a TV show they like because they had to sit through it to get to the one that they really wanted to. But when you have those situations where it's like, you know, like WonderCon last year, where like the Battlestar Galactica panel got pretty much rained out by all the Geek and Sundry fans, and it's kind of like, so you're losing that entire fan base, and it goes back to what James said, really. It's not that it's really what's fair, what's not fair, and all that. It's a tough one, but I just like that system just because of the ability to make decisions based on a time allocation. And it's like, there's a lot of things I'm willing to dedicate 3 or 4 hours to, but to 12 hours, and that includes, as much as I love exclusives, there's nothing that I'll dedicate that amount of time to, because there's just so many things I want to do during that day at the show.
Yeah. See, but I kind of feel the opposite of you, Sean, because I am one of those people who lines up in the night and camps out. But my whole thing is, I do that at night, and then by the time we get in at like 10 in the morning, I'm done waiting. I have the whole day now to sit in that panel room and see exactly what I want to see. Whereas you might get there at I don't know what time, but you go and you do one thing and you stand in line for 3 hours, and then you move on to something else and you stand in line for 2 hours for that. And yeah, you do a lot of different things, but I kind of feel like sitting in the one panel room all day, I actually get to see a lot more. So.
Yeah, Sarah, you haven't chimed in on this. What do you think?
Yeah, I think it's the same kind of question that you get in terms of badge sales, is how do you make that fair to everybody? And it's the same question of, is it more fair to someone who's going to press F5 and refresh the page fast enough, or having everybody sit in a waiting room and do a lottery? And it's the same kind of thing, because you can sit, waiting overnight in line is only fair to people who are physically able to wait overnight in line. And there's a lot of people who aren't young and healthy, or maybe they have little kids who can't wait in line, and they're kind of out of the running for those big panels that you had to be in line at 2 a.m. for. On the other hand, there's lots of people like Carrie who will wait in line for that, and they want to see every panel in the room for the day, or they want to see the majority of the panels in the room for a day. So, it's one of those things where no matter what policy they institute, somebody's going to be unhappy with it, because it's impossible to please everybody and make it truly fair.
Yeah. I think the one thing that they need to do, and it was part of the question, was about fairness and how people get mad when there's cuts, and I think that is the one thing that they need to fix, is they need to make sure that when people get in line, those are the only people that go into the room at that time, in that order. Because just like last year when we waited in Hall H at 5 o'clock on Friday night, I went and counted the line in front of me, and it was 65 people. And when we got let in, I think we were about 400th in line. And that means every person let in 5 other people. And that is the one thing that needs to stop. People need to get in line. They need to not let other people in line, and everyone will. It'll cut down on the bad feeling, because that was not a good feeling to see just how many people were in front of us at the end of the day.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think one thing, going back to the convention boom or bust question that Ollie was talking about too, is that what's nice is, because there are so many cons too, it allows for kind of a customization of the market to offer different things. So a creation show, you're going to have seats and you don't have to sweat it, and it is going to be this, and you can kind of, for us next week in Phoenix, Comic-Con is like our favorite show of the year, maybe even beyond San Diego to a certain extent, because it's 50,000 attendees, so they can bring in the Nathan Fillions and the Walking Dead cast and things. They're not going to have clips from the new clips or things like that, but they can bring enough of that, and yet we know we'll be able to see 5, 6, 7 panels a day, because they'll accommodate and they'll build that room, and it just can kind of change that, and you can kind of customize what experience you want then.
Yeah. It's interesting hearing all of your opinions and thoughts. I think it goes back to something that James and I say every year when we do our schedule breakdown. It's all about choices, right? Everybody's got their own priorities and their own things that they want to do, and everybody's different from each other. So it all depends on what Carrie wants is different than what Sean wants, is maybe different than what James wants. So it's really interesting, but it's all about choices and what do you want to get out of it. So.
Yeah, and Sean, I would love to see that fast pass system implemented at Comic-Con. I think that would be something that could at least give you a little bit more opportunity to explore the choices, because you would be spending less time in line at the con, and that would be more front-loaded. That would be something that would be really interesting. But what you end up seeing with these lines, if it is kind of a first-come, first-served system, there's this Cold War mentality where people will start lining up as early as other people do, and it kind of gets competitive. And what we've seen is every year people end up lining earlier and earlier, and not everyone can do that. So it would be nice. I think this is the big challenge for San Diego, for Comic-Con International now, is how do you deal with this big scale? And you're starting to see them do a lot of this with the ticketing, and I think the weighting system and the random assignment, that's probably as fair as you can make it. But it would be nice to see them now tackle this massive scale that they have of people and how to deal with these lines and all of that, and make it just a little bit easier, a little bit more comfortable, and a little bit more fair.
Yeah. Cool. Yeah, that was an excellent question. I do have one more question from our audience on this topic, and I think this is a really good one for you, Ali. Katina Lindsay, I think that's how you say her name. What's your take on Comic-Con withdrawals? The 3 or 4 days after con when people have to try and get back to normal life.
The Conley.
Yeah.
Conley.
It's a big bummer. It's
Is that the clinical?
It is. That's a political term. I will diagnose you with that, the post-Comic-Con bummer blues. Well, I think there's a lot of reasons why. So number one is you are running on a lot of and have worn out your body. So maybe you don't have to get back to school, so that's nice. But if you work, or if you have a family, or whatever it is, you're getting back to that stuff while you're still pretty exhausted. But I think a lot of the post-Comic-Con blues syndrome stuff that happens, it's being in a world that is so validating and so embracing of all the things you love, and seeing all these people that are connected to that, and now going back home to a world that's a little bit more normal and isn't filled with all the stuff that you love, and people being surrounded by people who just kind of get you without having to explain it all. I think a lot of it is that. And what I would suggest, my best recommendation to deal with the Comic-Con blues, is to continue forward the connections that you started at Comic-Con. So finding, if you are able to meet someone at Comic-Con, continuing that conversation online on Twitter, keeping in touch with the connections that you made, just like how you guys did with the Unofficial SDCC blog. Like you formed these connections and then kept them going, and here we are talking all across the country, and it's keeping a piece of Comic-Con going forward. And that's my advice for that, is it's normal. It happens to all of us, and the best way to kind of deal with it is keep a part of Comic-Con moving forward with you.
Very good. Cool, thanks. Well, thank you for talking about your article, and we'd love to have you stay on the rest of the podcast if you'd like to.
I would love to.
So we're going to get into the news of the week, so to speak. Although that was an excellent conversation. We're not going to be able to top that, so. But let's talk about this for a second. So there's been a fair amount of the news for the short week that we've had, because Monday was a holiday here in the States. I'm going to go to our resident TV expert, well, Carrie and Carrie, Kim, and Sarah. Do you guys watch Hannibal?
Yes.
Whoa.
Well, then let her talk about it.
I think Carrie has more details than me, but yeah, it's coming back, and I'm super
she's
excited.
eating like a raw steak. She's like, yes, I do. Some fava beans.
Yes. But basically, on Wednesday night, Hannibal had an Emmy screening, and at the screening, they asked some questions afterwards, and Brian Fuller announced that, yes, Hannibal is coming back to Comic-Con, so anybody who's a fan of that should be very excited. Woohoo. And, I mean, they haven't actually said, yes, we're having a panel, but especially if you're a TV show that's been on the air for a few years, you don't say, we're coming to Comic-Con, and not mean a panel.
Yeah.
So you can pretty much guarantee that, and hopefully they'll be back at Nerd HQ, too.
Yeah, and the funny thing is, they probably can't say we're having a panel, because obviously the panel schedules haven't been approved and finalized yet.
Right,
So
and that-
until that happens, it could be anything. But
And actually, probably here in the next week or so, they'll start sending out panel notifications. So.
Yep. Yeah, you're right. You're right.
Woo!
So we should hear in shortly. But I'm sure that it's NBC or it's like actually when we talked to Eric Goldman from IGN last year, he said, which is funny, and we're going to talk to him in a few weeks. But I'll put him on the spot because last year he said he wasn't he didn't think that Hannibal would be there, and it was, and now it's there again. So.
I think really the only question this year for Hannibal, like I said, it'll get a panel. There's really no question there.
I mean, it's NBC, but I think it's like a co-production with an international studio or something like that. So he was
It
like,
is.
I don't know
It's
if he's gonna
Galmon,
send-
which is Canadian, right? They're out of Toronto.
Oh,
Yeah.
is that what it is?
But NBC is the one who brought it last year. But last year it was put in a really small room, 6A, I think.
Right.
Yeah.
I remember that.
And
yeah.
so, will it get an upgrade to Ballroom 20 this year?
I don't know.
Stay
There's
tuned.
I would think so.
a lot of shows that aren't going to be there this year. So
Yeah.
I'd
we've
settle
had
for an
quite a few
upgrade to the
cancellations.
Indigo. That'd
Right.
be enough. I'd
There
take
you
that.
go. Yeah.
I have a question. Because I watch Hannibal, I just haven't watched the finale yet. Maybe tonight. But can one of you explain the flower crowns to me? Because I do not understand it. They're at the panels. They're everywhere. Don't understand it. And I watch the show.
My understanding with the flower crowns is that it's really a Tumblr thing. Is that
Yeah,
it
I
was
think
something
so.
that was kind of
Okay.
adopted by the fans on Tumblr. And I don't know if any of you are on Tumblr and follow any of that stuff. NBC's shows actually have a pretty big presence on Tumblr. Like, all of the shows interact with each other's Tumblrs. They, like, reblog each other's stuff and, like, have GIFs replies to each
That's
other.
awesome.
So I think that's part of it, is that they're fairly involved on Tumblr, so I think that's part of the reason that it got picked up into the panels. And, I know they wore them at Nerd HQ and everything.
Yeah,
so I think
that's where I
part of
saw them too. Okay, that makes more sense now because my Tumblr feed is mainly Sherlock and Doctor Who, so I should probably branch out a little bit. But that just saying Tumblr just really explains everything, actually.
Yeah, just say the word Tumblr and it'll make sense.
Well, you guys are saying Tumblr, but Kim, this relates to offsites a little bit. Remember the 2 awesome Tumblr events last year? I
Yeah.
wonder if Tumblr is going to get on with NBC since they're kind of going with that platform, or I don't even know if we want to call it, but they've got a big community on Tumblr. I wonder if they'll kind of pair together for an offsite this year.
I hope so.
have
That'd
my
be.
buttons. I think I have my buttons right here, my Tumblr buttons. Yep, right here.
I have some too, I don't know where they are.
Tumblr buttons, right there. Tumblr.
Yeah.
Mine are also still in the package. I also have not opened my package of Tumblr buttons.
All right, Ali, do you watch Hannibal?
No, but I mean, it keeps getting promoted at all these cons, so I guess I should. A lot of people have told me it's pretty good.
I know that's the problem that I have. Is there's like, it's always like, oh, you should watch this or you should watch that, and there's all this stuff that you have to consume. You're talking about like the comics, and now there's the TV shows and the movies. I mean, I'm like 2 years worth of movies behind. I haven't seen a new episode on TV in, like a year of anything, and it's like, oh, now I'm gonna go to Comic-Con and get everything spoiled for me. That's kind of like that's why I like when I go to like the new panels, because I'm not missing anything. I can start out fresh. Like we went to Intelligence last year, me and Carrie, and I liked that pilot, and I thought it was a good panel, and I was like, this is cool. I can start on ground zero, and it gets canceled. But you win some, you lose some.
Well, this is one of the problems with living in this golden age of the TV drama and stuff. There's just so much good TV to watch. I'm so behind on everything too. I pick like 3 things and that's it, and I stick to them, and then I fall behind. So.
Yeah, when I was single and a bachelor and didn't have kids and stuff, I had fantasized about making my own TV network, but for myself. So like all the DVDs of TV shows that come out, like I would buy them and make my own schedule. So like I would be able to watch like an episode a week of X-Files or Buffy, you know what I mean? And then kind of on my own schedule or on my own terms kind of relive like the golden age of television, But
has anyone read Ready Player One? Because that exact thing happens in Ready Player One.
Wow, no, I have the book, but I haven't read it yet.
Well,
yeah,
I guess.
on your last podcast.
Yeah,
Yeah, and as a video game fan, it's been on my must-read list. Unfortunately, all I get to is like nonfiction and biographies nowadays. But
It's a lot better than Amazing Spider-Man 2. I think you'll like it.
exactly. All right. Anything else on Hannibal?
I don't think so.
All right. Lincoln Park.
Hmm.
Lincoln Park is coming to San Diego.
They
Isn't that
are.
crazy? So there's not enough going on at San Diego now. Now we have to have Metallica and Linkin Park and Engelbert Humperdinck or whoever the hell is going to come. It seems like everybody who's anybody is going to descend on San Diego because that's where the attention is for like a week. So Carrie, you wrote that story up, didn't you?
Yeah, I did. Basically, what's going on is iHeartRadio is partnering with Linkin Park, and you can listen to some participating radio stations either online or actually on the radio. And I know, who does that anymore?
Yeah, I was going to say that exists.
It does.
Wow.
I know. But if you do that and you win, you get to go to Comic-Con, I think, for just 2 days.
You get badges.
Yeah, you get badges, and then they're providing 2 days hotel as well as the air transportation. And then Linkin Park is doing an intimate performance, which everybody's kind of like, what does that mean?
Means they come to your hotel room.
It just might. It just might. Or it
they
could
light
be
your
even-
mattress on fire.
Yes. Yes. Or it could mean that they're doing something like Metallica did last year and doing a small show somewhere. But
I think the latter is more likely.
I think so too.
Probably a little bit more likely.
Yeah, just a little bit. Who knows, man? You pay them enough. But when I think of Linkin Park, I think of James's favorite movies, the Transformers movies.
Yeah.
And I wasn't wondering if they might be doing something from. They're also doing a soundtrack to an upcoming like indie film. Yeah. I'm wondering if it's not tied in somehow.
Well, it's not. I mean, we looked it up, Carrie and I. I mean, it's directed by one of the guys in the band, but it's like it's not like a what's it called, Hall or something?
Mall. Mall.
It's like it's not a genre film, right? So it's like there's zero connection to Comic-Con.
Yeah.
And so I don't think it's going to be one that they're going to be promoting at Comic-Con, or at least who knows? They always have those weird indie films, but who knows? But it seems like a weird disconnection, or there's not really a clear connection between why Linkin Park is going to be in Comic-Con. They don't even have a song on the upcoming
Transformers.
They don't. I was wondering that.
No, I looked it up, and they don't have a credit. So I mean, that would be the logical link, but it's not.
Right.
So, yeah.
Are they linked to Ninja Turtles at all?
Well, that's what I was thinking, because Michael Bay, right? But not on the credits. No.
Huh.
Yeah, it could be. I mean, not on IMDb anyway.
Who knows though? But Linkin Park will be at Comic-Con.
And a lot of people were like, Linkin Park, yeah, they were all excited. So
many people, yeah, way more than I thought.
Pretty big. All right, we have, real quick, we posted our Movies of Comic-Con 2014 prediction list earlier this week. And did anybody? I didn't even look, but I saw it on my phone. Somebody commented as Michael Bay that said we forgot the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. That was pretty funny. But we're going to be talking about that next week. So our guest next week is going to be Jermaine Lucier from Slash Film. So he's going to be returning this year again. So that's awesome. So we're not talking about that this week. We'll talk about it next week. Just want to let everybody know. But we did have some exclusive news this week. The one today, which I thought was pretty big, and we were kind of, some of our readers were telling us about that this might be coming. It's a partnership between Hot Wheels and Star Wars, but there's no details, or they didn't make any details known. They're just going to say there's going to be more in the issue number 150 of Star Wars Insider, which comes out June 10th. But looks like we're going to be getting some die-cast Star Wars vehicles this year at Comic-Con. So that is pretty cool, right?
Yeah, and it's just like the movies with Disney now involved. There's no more kind of one man's philosophy, and it's more of a corporate philosophy. So there's a lot more team ups, and even to see more of a broadening. So that was interesting because obviously they've had a link with Cars in the past with Pixar and stuff, and so it makes sense that that would be something new there, and I think people will be really excited because anytime there's so much Star Wars as it is, but anytime it crosses into something kind of new or different, I think it's just an automatic hit. So I'm guessing that'll be a really popular item.
Sean, I don't know if you had this, but when I was a kid, I had and I don't know if it was a Hot Wheels or a Matchbox. It was a Darth Vader's TIE Fighter.
Mm-hmm.
But it was like a Matchbox diecast that had roller on it. Of course he has it.
There we go.
No. It was.
Was it a micro machine?
No, it wasn't a micro machine. It was like the wings. I'm doing this. The Darth Vader wings that were kind of crooked, whatever you call it. But it was flat and long. So if you looked at it on the top, it was like the size of a Matchbox car, and you'd be able to roll it. Yeah, it was interesting.
Right.
So I had one of those. So I don't know if they ever had a partnership or anything in the past, but blast from the past. There you go.
Yeah, definitely.
But yeah, that's cool. So we'll find out more June 10th or thereabouts. And the interesting thing that about Maddie, they were supposed to give us 5 exclusives a couple weeks ago, and they only gave us 3. So there's 2 more out there that we're waiting on, plus the 1 or 2 extra reveals that they promised between now and Comic-Con. So there should be more Maddie news anyway. But
yeah, they're pretty notorious in the toy community for causing a lot of chaos and just disappointment and things like that. So there's subscription service and everything. There's a lot of times where it's like, the fans vote for figure A and they get figure B, and the situation at Comic-Con's been an ongoing. It's gotten a lot better this year, but it's been kind of an ongoing thing of even picking up the prepaid stuff, and it just seems like there's always drama related to it. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see what goes the rest of the stretch.
Yeah, cool. Real quick, I want to answer a question from our readers. This is Brian Kilby. He says, "How do you do the names under your face? We were born that way." That's what I was saying. All right. I'm never serious about anything. So, if I took Comic-Con,
Spider-Man 2.
If I took Comic-Con seriously, I'd be visiting Ali on a weekly basis. Let's just say that, right?
We can make that happen. We don't live too far away.
We probably should make that happen, to be honest with you. But all right, so
wait another month when all the news starts coming every 5 minutes.
Yeah, just ask the rest of the team to their opinion. They'd be like, yes, he definitely needs to see you on a weekly basis. But all right, so other exclusives. So the NECA Scalers that came out last Friday. So we have a new NECA exclusive that's due tomorrow, but they announced the NECA Scalers.
And a few hours ago, they tweeted who's ready to see the Predacon exclusive or the Predator exclusive.
Well,
Transformers on the brain.
So you think it's going to be Predator tomorrow?
NECA said it would be.
Oh, well, there you go.
One thing on the scalers is just so people know too, there are scalers like at Toys R Us right now that you can pick up. So obviously the exclusives are the exclusives, but just saw a lot of people on Twitter like, oh my God, these are amazing, I need to get one. And it's like you could go to Toys R Us today and get all sorts of different characters. So these are variants and things like that. But I was even tempted. They had a really cool classic Cornelius from Planet of the Apes, and I was like, oh, that looks really cool, So definitely check out Toys R Us if you're just looking for them.
Yeah, and also I saw some at Toy Fair when I was there this year. So I have in the NECA video that I have. I'll put that in the show notes. But you can see those guys in action. In action being they go up and down on a rope. So very exciting. What else? The DC's Harley Quinn. It was announced earlier this week on the DC Inside. Whatever that was, but that's a pretty cool looking statue, very detailed. Not many details announced on that one, like price or availability even. They just said it would be available at certain Diamond retailers at the show, but Sean, correct me if I'm wrong, like one Diamond retailer at the show.
Yeah,
right?
Diamond has their central booth.
Yeah, it's
there.
Diamond. So, but they did say that it would be available for folks that aren't going to be at the convention, and they would send out a list shortly. So I don't know if that's what they meant by it's going to go through Diamond distribution and it'll show up at comic book stores around the country or something like that.
Right.
But that was pretty popular. Anything on that one, Sean, that you want to mention?
No, I mean just anything Harley Quinn is so big these days. So yeah, wherever it'll be crowded and people. And it kind of, I was thinking, kind of going back to what you guys talked about in the last couple of weeks with Hasbro and some of those things, because like that Infinity Gauntlet set is going to be super popular, and Job is going to be super popular. But it's interesting because you see the price hiking more and more, and it kind of goes to actually Ollie's article as well, kind of the psychology behind collecting and things like that. Because the truth is that Jabba could be $250 and it will sell out, you know. And so it's interesting because you're just seeing it creep up. And so, but the Infinity Gauntlet, what's interesting because was this equivalent set was $50 last year, and now it's creeping up to $75. And yeah, you get the hand, but last year you got the taco truck, you know, and stuff, and it just keeps going that way. And so Harley Quinn, you know, kind of reminded me of that. It's almost like whatever price it's going to be, it's going to sell out because the market will demand that, and then it'll just go for that much more on eBay, and it just goes round and round.
Yeah, and when I was at Toy Fair talking to the folks at Hasbro, a couple reasons why the price keeps going up. Basically, they're using, well, they use the excuse anyway. I don't know, but they said that that because they're the smaller runs, that's why it costs more. But also they're putting that money into the packaging, so they're making it kind of the overall. Go ahead, James.
The only way that floats is if they're actually creating new molds for those figures, which is where the expense is. If they're just repainting existing figures, there is no additional cost. It's just another run to produce the same figure that they've already done.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
At least in my opinion, that's the only way that they can justify the expense.
Right. Yeah, like the Deadpool figures last year, those were new molds on all really except maybe Deadpool. So and then like with Jabba, it'll be that Salacious Crumb, which is the one that nobody will be able to get unless you're at Comic-Con. So yeah, that creates a whole new level of just demand because people I'm such a big collector, but I don't have the completionist syndrome. Like I don't need to have everything from anything because I collect everything, so I know I'm not going to have everything. But there's a lot of people that you know they'll feel like, well, I'm incomplete if I'm missing that one. You know, like last year the Carbonite Han. You know, and they're like, if I don't have Carbonite Han, my set's not complete. Mm-hmm. And so you'll see those things just continue to go for $150 on eBay for forever.
Yeah, it's crazy. It's crazy. All right. Anything else? Anything else about the Hasbro stuff? Yeah, that Infinity Gauntlet. That's a great package, and it looks awesome.
It's really cool.
The last one I want to talk. Well, the Factory Entertainment's the Lana from Archer. So that's Aisha Tyler.
Mm-hmm.
Aisha Tyler, yeah.
Yep. She the character that she voices. So they're doing a cool statue of her that talks and supposed to move. So we have we were sent the exclusive some of the audio clips that they'll be using on that, so you can check that out on the site. And then the last one I'm going to talk about is this Mezco Rebel Frankenstein. What the heck is that? Like when I looked at it, I was like, cool, it's Groovy Ghoulies, and then it wasn't really. So I was like, oh well, not that is cool.
Yeah, and this week's, I mean, for those people that, you know, every year we have new people that are like, this is the year I'm going to fight for some of these exclusives or things, and this week is like a perfect week to look at in terms of you know, going to kind of the theme of the show, just the psychology of exclusives, which is some of these are going to be super high demand and are going to require you to be there at 4 a.m. or, you know, whatever it is, and others are going to be able, you know, you can pick them up at Toys R Us the week after or things, and sometimes it's hard to know, you know, and a lot of times, for example, NECA last year with the, you know, that Jason just went crazy, and it was just, you know, a crazy demand that they really hadn't experienced to that degree at that booth before, whereas something like Hasbro or Mattel, you know, that's always going to be consistent. So, you know, looking at the Mezco Rebel Frankenstein, that was something I looked at and I was like, yeah, that'll be sitting around and that's not going to be a challenge, but who knows, I could be totally wrong and it may be the hit of Comic-Con, you know.
Right, we should all cosplay as Rebel Frankenstein this week, just to start a trend.
Right.
Do you all ever get any numbers on what the quantity is on some of these exclusives? Like I tried so hard to get the battle damaged USS Kelvin Hallmark figure last year, and I just couldn't. And then I tried to get a New York Comic Con, and I couldn't get it there. Do you guys ever get information on like, well, okay, this thing's probably gonna sell out. Yeah. This thing's gonna be at Toys R Us?
Yeah, I mean, like the Hallmarks will release the run on those, and so that one is something like Hasbro usually not as much, and something like Hasbro, like a real challenge there is they'll go in and out of stock during the day. So like you could be there first, you know, in Thursday, get a get a time slot of noon or whatever, because they actually give you a time slot there. And by the time you get to the front of the line, your item may not be available any longer, and then you're gone, and it's available 2 hours later because they got another truck coming in. So it's tough with some of those. And there's things, there's again things on Sunday at Hasbro that you could walk up and get, and you're just shocked. And then there's other things that are gone. So it's tough even sometimes with those numbers, but with so many booths having exclusives too, like in the designer side or the toy vinyl market and things, they'll be more ready with the numbers. And definitely Hallmark is good with giving the numbers, but a lot of them it's not clear. You're not sure, is it 10,000, is it 5,000, is it 1,000?
Right. When I talked to Hasbro, I think they were talking about like 5,000 for their runs.
Yeah.
But you'll get things as low as like 500. And I don't know, it's really weird because, Sean, I don't know if you got this. Did you get that Tron,
Yes.
the arcade cabinet?
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Yep. And I got one too. That was 1,500, and I remember I got that on Sunday. Now they had allotments throughout the week. But, I got one of those. It's like, could you imagine getting something that had a 1,500 run nowadays? It would be virtually impossible.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, and that was one Carmel got, and I was like, I wanted it, but I was like, it's not even, there's no way, because it was just so crazy. Because that was one of the ones where they basically would cap the line, and then be like, we're not going to tell you when we open the line, and then they would just step away and bodies would collide into the aisle and stuff. Yeah. And somehow she eventually got through on that Friday or whatever. But yeah, totally.
Yeah, it's crazy.
And back in 2008, the runs were like 250 figures or 500. I've got a Funko Bender from Futurama Bank that was 250 run. Like, wow, how did I get this?
Right.
Because it's not doable now.
Totally.
Yeah.
Right.
It's crazy. It's really crazy. All right. That's it on exclusives. Anything else on exclusives? Nope. All right. So we talked about Linkin Park. That might be an offsite. That might not. I don't know. But we do want to tell all of our viewers and readers about the offsite calendar. It is now brought to you by Eventbrite, which is very cool. So if you're thinking about hosting an event for Comic-Con, Eventbrite will help you get your event page up in a flash. No matter the shape or size of your event, with Eventbrite you can create customized event pages, manage ticket sales, and spread the word to rally more comic and pulp culture fans under one roof. You can click on the links on our site to learn more about setting up your event for Comic-Con today. So just wanted to make everybody aware of that. All right. So that's all we've got, guys. So anybody have anything they want to bring up before close?
I've got one thing. Don't forget as well to sign up for our newsletter, because speaking of events, this weekend we will be unveiling the details of our second annual enchantment under the SDCC in that newsletter.
Yeah,
that's awesome.
Like
that is awesome.
Yes, we like our name as well. But yeah, people who are subscribed to our newsletter will get that information first, so make sure you sign up before this weekend. And we'll put a link to that as well in the show notes.
I got to sign up for that.
Yeah, you do.
Have to
You
sign
guys
up
will,
for that
you guys
too.
will tell me. You guys will tell me. I don't have to sign up, do I? You guys will tell me where it is, right?
No, we're not going to tell you.
No.
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 Sorry, James. Got to sign up.
You've got one chance.
Sorry, James. It's very competitive. All right, I want to close with some comments. So Janet R. From the chat says, Ready Player One is one of her favorite books, and Will Wheaton reading the audiobook is amazing. That's cool.
Yep.
I mean, so I've got to check that out. Robert W. says, first time joining one of these Google Hangouts. Thanks for all the SDCC updates and news. Thank you for joining us. And Diego Alves Lima says, hey, hugs from Brazil. So cool. International audience. There you go. I don't think we have anything else. So let's go ahead and bring this to a close. Ali, thank you so much for joining us today.
Yes, thank you.
Yes.
Thank you.
Hope you had as much fun as we had talking.
Oh my gosh, I am in awe of your guys' knowledge of SDCC and everything that goes into it. I just want to say, as a longtime fan of you guys' website, I think you guys are doing awesome stuff, and you're making San Diego Comic-Con not just more awesome for longtime fans of the con, but you're making it so much easier to get into for newbies. And it's such an intimidating experience that the first time I went to San Diego Comic-Con, your guys' stuff just really helped me kind of navigate it and make sure I had a good plan going into it. So thanks for having me on. I had a blast.
Awesome. Thanks. And you're welcome to come back on anytime. So where can our listeners find more of your work on the internet?
Yeah, so we can connect on Twitter. I'm at Mattu, and my website is brainknowsbetter.com, where I talk about the psychology of science fiction. And I'm also the co-host of the Super Fantastic Nerd Hour podcast, where we talk about all the awesome things that nerds love. You can check us out at superfantasticnerdhour.com or search for us in Stitcher or iTunes.
Yeah, and I love your top 5 that you do, which is so awesome. It totally reinforces the topic, and it's great to listen to. So
yeah, thanks. It's a very nerdy podcast. We talk about one thing, and then we throw 2 things into an infinite crossover chamber, and we do a top 5. So if you're a nerd, you'll probably enjoy it.
All right. James, how about you?
Where am I? I'm on Twitter and pretty much everywhere else.
I don't think you know.
Ken Regal. And you can check out our photography website at geekshotphoto.com, and you'll find us traveling around with Steam Powered Giraffe, my wife and I.
Yep.
And just check them out, too.
The award-winning geekshotphoto.com.
That's right.
Cool.
I'll say that because you won't. Carrie, how about you?
You can find me on Twitter at Carrie Dixon, which is KERYDIXON, and nowhere else.
It's on your name.
That's right. It's on my name,
right
unless
here.
you're listening to the radio.
Sarah?
Oh, yeah.
Conshark.com or on Twitter at consharknews.
Very cool. Kim?
And I am Outside Comic-Con on Twitter and OutsideComicCon.com on the web.
And Sean, other than a convention near you, where can our listeners find you?
TheConfluenceCovers.com, and you can follow on Twitter at _con_fluence. And we have a lot of stuff in June, so if you're interested in conventions, or we have Long Beach, we have Phoenix, we have Anime coming up in early July, we have Amazing Las Vegas, and then we have a bunch of little Disney things and the Knott's Media Day. So yeah, it'll be a busy June and a lot of cool stuff, hopefully, that people enjoy.
Yeah, very much so. And am I missing anybody? I know it's a
Just
bit.
yourself.
Just myself. You can find me at Spot Anime, which I don't really do much there nowadays, but I'm also at SD_comic_con, which is the official Twitter account for the blog, and also on the website SDCCblog.com. We are on iTunes, so if you'd like to subscribe, the links are up on the blog, or you can search for SDConCast in iTunes. If you like what you've heard so far, please review us. We are also on Stitcher Radio, so go to the link in the show notes. And if you want to get a hold of us, you can send an email at sdcomiccon.blog@gmail.com. You can find us at Facebook at facebook.com/sdconblog, or tweet us at sd_comic_con. Thanks for listening, and until next week. Ali, do you know how we send everybody off? Do you want to take it this time?
Does it involve eating a burrito?
Pretty close. Everybody go shawarma.
Everybody go shawarma.
There you go. All right. Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Uh-huh.